Meanwhile, here is Fox and Friends. Is this Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends with Eugene Scalia, who is our labor secretary. And Kilmeade has a theory about all these people who are losing their job.
You have to understand some of these restaurants and health clubs, the 75-25 doesn't work out. If they have to give 75% of the money to labor, they're not going to have any money to pay their bills and pay their rent and pay their lease and pay for equipment that they rent. So if the money's there, there's got to be flexibility given to the banks to allow small business to use it. Because right now, if they're going to put all that money to labor, they're not going to have a business to go back to. So do you see that? Do you see some flexibility there?
Well, I think that the Treasury Department and the Small Business Administration, which have been running this program, have shown a lot of flexibility. There were some adjustments to the application form made early on that made it easier for people to apply. I just think the program has been functioning extraordinarily well. Its biggest challenge has been really its popularity.
But not in those two areas. These restaurant owners can't live with 75% going to labor. Many of these people don't want their part-time jobs back. So you can't give them the money, tell them to give them to people that don't want the jobs, and then ask them to keep the lights on and turn up with a diminished seating capacity when they come back. It's not going to work.
Well, we'll keep looking for the right balance there. And as you say, the Small Business Administration, Treasurer are running that program. From my perspective, the Labor Department, those relationships with workers and poising our companies, the businesses to come back, but also to have those workers still tied to them and keeping those strong relationships is really going to be very important to getting the economy going.
First of all, this is clearly Brian Kilmeade just has a buddy who has a restaurant that has extremely high fixed costs, or he took out huge loans to redo the restaurant. But the small business loans that Kilmeade is talking about, first of all, it's been a crap show for people trying to get this because the banks, they just don't want to make these loans. They get fees, but they don't make enough on it. And the reason why they've gone to the banks is because there's no way to get this money to these small businesses. Now, they could have gone through the Social Security Administration, which has all the federal ID numbers, has all the addresses, knows what theoretically what the payroll is for a lot of these people. But when he's talking about 75%, he's only talking about grants. The Small Business Administration is giving 10 weeks worth of wages. They make the loan, and then you won't have to pay that back. If you are paying for wages and you're paying for rent on your small business, so for 2.5 months, those loans theoretically are going to be forgiven, which means it's a grant. You can borrow more money. You can borrow it, I think it's something like 3%. But Kilmeade wants more money to these small businesses for people who have taken out excessive debt. And he doesn't want it just so that they can pay off the debt. He wants it so that they can get the debt completely relinquished. But if that's the case, then you got to go to the banks. And you're going to deal with the banks and their loans. If people don't want their jobs back, I don't even know what this means. Like, if you're a restaurant, you've done one of two things. You've either kept your employees on salary or you've fired them. And if you fired them, they've gone and they've gotten unemployment, or they've applied for it. They certainly haven't gotten it at this point, depending on which state you're in. Some of these states are just a disaster. But if you've kept them on, you have the option of either firing them or not firing them, and getting that money for 10 weeks of paying for their payroll. If you fire them, they'll go on to unemployment, assuming it works, which is a big assumption. And if you don't fire them, you don't get that money. You don't get to keep that money. in perpetuity. You can pay it off down the road at 3% interest, which is, 2-3% interest is nearly free money. But Kilmeade seems to have a problem with the only way. We're paying out people two different ways. We're either paying them unemployment because they've lost their job and it's only temporary. And then we're either paying companies to keep them on payroll for 10 weeks. That's it. And then I guess, the means tested $1,200 at one-time thing that's going to go out that people aren't going to even see till April for half the people more. Kilmeade we can't countenance that. The idea that people are actually going to get their the ability to go out and pay for their rent. It's absurd. Lastly, there's been more and more labor actions that are going on because in many respects, again, it's the same thing that we were saying with Ronald Reagan. We called in a Donald Trump world. The most vulnerable are folks like immigrants, and depending on the context, people of color, broadly speaking, low income folks, people relying on things like Medicaid, depending on the state, unemployment insurance. And I think there's also a lot of folks in the context of what's going on with coronavirus where they realize, like, man, my situation is even worse than I thought. I had a sense I was low on the totem pole, but I am really low on the totem pole. And there are people who are working and forced to work in this environment, either because they have no other way of getting cash. They want to keep their jobs as long as they can, deemed essential. There's some fast workers on strike in LA. A lot of McDonald's workers I know are on strike in LA. And we talked about, like, how do people strike in this situation? Well, in LA, they're doing it from their cars. Play this clip. There you go. Striking in their cars. I saw something like this too, like a noise strike, I think outside of Cook County Prison a couple of days ago. Videos, folks going by and doing it from their cars. All right, let's take one more